Look past the cornerback position and you'll see a really talented defense ready to once again embody the tough and nasty culture of the Cincinnati Bearcats football program.
Are Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. We are free and available everywhere you get your podcasts and on YouTube, still up to 430 subscribers and counting. Subscribe and follow us to get an alert every time we drop a new episode. Alex Frank with you, your host each and every day, former sports director at Bearcast Media at the University of Cincinnati, bringing all of those experiences here to the Locked On Bearcats podcast. We're talking about the defense today. It's the defense as part of our season preview 5 ways this week. We're going to talk about the elephant in the room that is the cornerback position, the turnover. Is it going to look drastically different? Then we're going to move into the front seven, why it's ultra important for this defense. Then the one thing that needs to change, it won't, sadly, but I'll explain what that is. So it's clearly the elephant in the room, and that's the cornerback position. What's it going to look like? Post Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant. Is it going to be drastically different? Who is going to start? There are so many questions that you have. And I understand if this is for you a scary and unsettling feeling, because it is for me. You know, I got so used to Sauce Gardner's dominance, Kobe Bryant's greatness. Then now we're moving into this unknown. You don't know who's going to start a corner. Now, here's the thing. The guys who are going to start a corner already are more experienced than Sauce Gardner was when he came to Cincinnati. Remember Sauce Gardner, for as great as he became and as dominant as he became, it's worth mentioning that he was just this 3-star recruit, 6th corner on the depth chart as a freshman, a true freshman. It just so happened that he quickly blossomed into one of the best corners and then the arguably best corner in America. Kobe Bryant the same way. You know who Kobe Bryant was. He became an All-American. He became the Jim Thorpe Award winner. So there is validity to the fact that the guys taking over a corner this year already are more experienced than Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant were when they first started. So I know that might be hard to wrap your head around, but it's true. So who starts a corner for Cincinnati? You have Arquan Bush, very experienced, like him a lot. Who else, though? How do Todd Bumpus and Sammy Anderson, are they going to start? Do teams throw to the boundary side of the field more often? Because whoever starts alongside Arquan Bush is going to play the boundary. It's safe to say I'm more concerned about this position than I am a quarterback and running back. Why? Because it was so dominant last year. Because you're replacing greatness. And naturally, when you replace great players at a position, there's going to be some angst and there's going to be some questions. And you can look around any position in college football. Great positions that have been greatness that has been replaced over the past, 15, 20 years. Who's replaced Colt McCoy at Texas? Whoever replaces Desmond Ridder at quarterback at Cincinnati. You can go on down the line. Who replaced Kellen Moore at Boise State, to give that group of 5 reference. Down at UCF, who replaced Mackenzie Milton. That was actually Dylan Gabriel. But again, you look around the group of 5, you look around college football overall, and it's hard replacing greatness. And as a fan of a program, and we become emotionally attached to our program because we went there. We are a Bearcat. I'm a Bearcat. My mom's a Bearcat. My grandparents are Bearcats. And when you are attached to something and you replace it, there's going to be some angst and you're going to have that unsettling feeling. Well, how much different is it going to look? Well, the good news is this. We've been so used to greatness. Maybe it's just another, success breeding success. And the good news is if you move past the cornerback, when we're talking about the defense overall, a defense that was extremely good last year, Yes, there are only 4 returning starters, but I still think this defense can be rock solid. The one thing that the Bearcats have going for them, and I've read this many different places and I've been told this by many different people, is that there's a culture in place. There is a culture that is in place within the Cincinnati Bearcats. And when you have that, that makes it easier to, as Russ Heltman told me, who's going to be on the show tomorrow with James Rapine, as Russ told me, this is a major this is not a major transition. This is just a passing of the baton. And when you say it like that, that lets you know, okay, maybe this team is still going to be pretty good. I still think they will, the Cincinnati Bearcats. I still think they're going to be a very good defense. Because I look at the guys up front, and there's not an unfamiliar face. Todd Bumpus and Sammy Anderson are unfamiliar because they haven't started. But the linebacker position has the Pace brothers, who both of them have started. Yaheem Thomas hasn't started, but a 4-star recruit who has been waiting to get out onto the field. And Wilson Huber, who hasn't been a starter, but has been a special teams ace. And when he was in the games last year, performed really well. Up front, Malik Vann, Jabari Taylor, and Jawan Briggs. You know who those guys are. They're going to be anchoring the defensive line this year, but you feel pretty good about that because you've seen them make plays before. So if you look past the cornerback room, you have guys who embody the culture that's in place, the tough and nasty culture. Years of recruiting and developing are going to pay off. You've got good position coaches in place. Walter Stewart on the defensive line, Kerry Combs at cornerback. Mike Tressel's overseeing the linebackers and the overall defense as defensive coordinator. Continuing the belief that success breeds success. And if you look at this program over the years, it's been from Perry Young, Jarrell White, and Brian Wright to now Deshaun Pace, but even before him, to Darian Beavers, Joel DeBlanco, and now it's going to be the Pace brothers, Thomas, Wilson, Huber. Up front, it's been Copeland, Fitz, and Cortez Broughton to Elijah Ponder and Curtis Brooks, now to Malik Vann, Jabari Taylor, and Jawan Briggs. And when I say that, that should give you this feeling of, ooh, you know what? Hey, we are pretty good. We are pretty, what's the word I'm looking for? Continual. And it's just, one wave of players after another. And going back to Russ's point, as he told me this weekend, it's when you have a passing of the baton. When you have a passing of the baton, it makes it that much easier, and it gives you that, okay, we're going to be fine. I understand the cornerback room is the elephant in the room. Like, you are worried about who takes over a quarterback because Desmond Ridder was so good. Desmond Ridder, it's interesting because he was so great, but I think the thing about Ridder was he was here for so long, you got used to him, then he got great. And then at running back, it's Jared Dokes had been here since 2017, something like that. Jerome Ford was here for 2 years. Michael Warren was here for 3. When you have that much continuity at running back and you're used to the guys and you have this turnover, like this is the first major roster turnover that Luke Fickell has had. Cornerback is going to highlight it. Quarterback, running back will too. I should have mentioned that yesterday. But this is the first major roster turnover. And that's why, like I said yesterday, this is the year for Luke Fickell to truly put his stamp on the program as a head coach. It's why his coaching will matter this year more than ever. Speaking of which, coming up, why the front seven of this defense is ultra important. I'll explain after a word from BetOnline. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. You can find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball. We're gearing up for the pennant chase. The NBA schedule was just released. NHL, combat sports. Did I even mention NFL? That season's less than 3 weeks away from kicking off. Combat sports, esports, and even golf. You can find reviews and news of those leagues too. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sports wagering information. From live in-game betting scores and podcasts, they've got you covered. Head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. Bet online where the game starts. Thanks again for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. The ultimate college football preview is here. It's a 7-episode preview with the college experts, local team experts, and Odyssey college football insiders. Everything you need to be ready for the college football season in one spot. Search for Ultimate College Football Preview on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcast. Alex Frank with you. Of course, the Bearcats are just 11 days away from their season opener in Fayetteville, Arkansas against the Razorbacks, a game that you can see on ESPN at 3:30 on September 3rd. You can also listen to the game live or hear the game live locally on 700 WLW. Dan Horde, Jim Kelly Jr., Mo Egger. Mo's going to be on the show Thursday for his season preview edition of Locked On Bearcats. All right. So as I mentioned before, going to our at the end of segment 1, the front 7. It's got a lot of potential. There is a lot of talent on this front 7. There are great players. You might see some of these players on this team eventually playing on Sunday. Here's the reality, though. They are so important to this year's team. And I say that because this. Remember Nick Saban and his game plan against Cincinnati in the Cotton Bowl. And this is something I said could happen. And I feared it would happen, and it did. So the storyline, one of them at least, going into the game was, could Alabama, it was Alabama's receivers against Sauce Gardner and Kobe Bryant, particularly Jamison Williams against Sauce Gardner. John Mechie III wasn't playing. He was out with a torn ACL. So what was going to happen with that? And we were all excited that Sauce Gardner was going to shut down Jamison Williams. But then I remembered saying, Nick Saban might not even decide to throw to him. What if Nick Saban decides to just run the ball 40 times? And that is exactly what Alabama did. First possession, 11 plays, 10 rushing plays. The only passing play, a touchdown pass to Slade Bolden from Bryce Young, Heisman Trophy winner. That completely took the wind out of UC's sails. The Bearcats gave up over 300 yards rushing that day. But it goes to show you that Nick Saban knew the strength of this team was its corners. He knew they could exploit Cincinnati in the front 7. And he did. He did. So, that leads me to this. What if this year again, and this would be a good thing, the secondary doesn't have to get tested? What if the front 7 is so good, everything's kept in front of them? Just make sure you don't stay out on the field too long defensively. Because I look at this front 7. I look at the Pace brothers, Huber, Thomas, Briggs, Van, Taylor, maybe Noah Potter. I look at this front 7. And there's enough talent on this defense. And if this program, which Luke Fickell talks about constantly, is driven through the trenches, there is enough talent on this defense to not have a drastic drop-off from last year. If the front 7 becomes the strength, and the strength of this program is driven through its offensive and defensive lines. And remember 2018, it was a dominant defensive line. So what if Cincinnati is so good up front that their secondary is basically rendered moot? Like, it's not inconceivable for me to think that that could happen. Like, the front 7 could be that good. It could be that good at getting to the quarterback. It could be that good. The linebackers could have running lanes to get to the quarterback, stop the run, whatever. I look at this pass rush, and I think it could be better than last year. The linebackers are versatile. They're more talented. If the front 7 can be that good, that's going to make this secondary's job easier. The front 7 is going to dictate the success of this defense. I think. If you're worried about the secondary and how it's going to look post Sauce Gardner and post Kobe Bryant, that's fine. But at the end of the day, maybe the front seven will be good enough where teams can't throw, where teams, they'll have to throw the ball. But then, the corners are going to be like, okay, we don't have to do so much. Like, we're not stressed. Like, if the front seven's able to stop the run, make the offense one-dimensional, plus get pressure on the quarterback, have an edge rush this year, I truly think that is going to make this defense successful. So last year was, it's a bad thing. Nick Saban never tested the corners. This year it's, okay, if teams don't, that's a good thing because that means the front seven is doing its job, what it's supposed to be doing. That's what I hope happens. I hope that the front of the defense, how it's driven, it drives this program, rises to the occasion. That is what I hope happens. I hope that Deshaun and Ivan Pace are as good as advertised. That Wilson Huber, he's got a high motor every single play. That I hope Yaheem Thomas and the defensive line of Malik Vann and Jawan Briggs and Jabari Taylor able to get a push on the opposing offensive line. If that happens, this program is not going to take a very big step back defensively. I would argue that I don't think this defense is as talented as last year's. I don't know if it's as deep as it was last year. Only 4 returning starters. But at the end of the day, I still think it's a very solid defense. Javon Hicks is a veteran. Arquan Bush is a veteran. The Pace brothers have been playing a lot of college football. You've got Wilson Huber, a 6th-year player. Van has been here for 5 years. Jabari Taylor's been here a long time. Same with Jawan Briggs. He's played, a lot of years of college football. So there's experience and there's a lot of talent, and it's going to embrace the culture of tough and nasty. I still think it will. And I think another hard part to this season is without the alpha dogs of Ritter, Pierce, and Jerome Ford, whomever, without those alpha dogs, how are you going to be able to, embrace that tough and nasty culture? That's why there's going to be some leaders that have to step up. Guys like, whoever starts a quarterback on offense, on defense, it's up front at linebacker. I think last year Sauce Gardner was one of those leaders. Desmond Ritter was too. Maybe it happens again defensively with a guy like Wilson Huber, who I've said is I'm most excited to see emerge as a leader this year. But there is a lot at stake, for this defense. They cannot have too big of a drop-off. Then they cannot have too much of a drop-off compared to last year. If they're going to win a 3rd straight conference championship, which is the goal of this season. At the end of the day, though, the front seven has to do its job. Because then the secondary's job is going to be easier. And for a new secondary, it's going to have a lot of new faces taking over for greatness. That is a very good thing. That's a very good luxury to have. And it really is. Up next, one thing needs to change on this defense. It won't. I'll explain what that is next, after a word from 2 of our sponsors. I got to be honest here. We got a problem. The Cincinnati Bearcats have a problem up front. Arkansas last year, like we all know what Alabama did to the Bearcats defense in the Cotton Bowl last year. Arkansas was the number 1 SEC rushing team last year. 227 point something yards per game. Led the SEC 7th in the country. Alabama ran for 300 plus in the Cotton Bowl. What does that tell you? It tells you that SEC teams are physical. And you wonder why most of your NFL draft picks and most of your NFL players hail from SEC schools. Look no further than the Cotton Bowl last year. Look no further than any other year. Because they play a very pro-style, physical brand of football. And it's no secret. You can look around the NFL. I'll start with the running backs. Look at your great running backs today. You've got Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Najee Harris, Joe Mixon, Nick Chubb, Deebo Samuel when he's a running back or used as one, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Josh Jacobs, Leonard Fournette, Alvin Kamara. Now, what do those 10 running backs? 8 of them hail from the SEC. It's no secret the SEC produces great running backs. Look all around the NFL, and I'm telling you right now, Arkansas's game plan is going to be very simple on September 3rd. They're going to run the ball straight down the Bearcats' throats, just like Nick Saban did. If Arkansas was watching the Cotton Bowl, if they were studying Bill O'Brien and Nick Saban's game plan, it's very simple. Run the ball. And you want to know why teams are running the ball? Because the Bearcats play a 3-3-5 defense, which works most of the time in the American. It doesn't work against SEC teams. Like, look at your quarterbacks. Look at your great quarterbacks in the NFL. Here's the difference. Rodgers, Brady, Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Stafford, Herbert, Jackson, Prescott, Derek Carr. Only 2 of those quarterbacks I just mentioned hail from the SEC. Burrow and Stafford. So, what this is telling you is teams are going to look at a 3-3-5 and see, okay, 5 offensive linemen versus 3 down linemen, easy. We're running the football against you guys. Try and stop us. You won't. So that's a problem. And it's going to be a problem for the Bearcats in Fayetteville. If you're going to stay at this level, if you're going to be a top 10 program for years to come, and you're going to have to run through the SEC to do so, you have to be able to stop the run. Playing a 3-3-5 defense will not allow you to do that. You have to consider making a change. Because again, when you get to the Big 12, if you are going to stay at the top, you have to, and you're going to have to go through the SEC. That's just the way of the world. And you look at the Big 12 teams who have made the college football playoff. Oklahoma went 3 consecutive years and played 3 different SEC teams. They got blown out in 2, and they lost in overtime in the other because they couldn't stop a 2-headed monster of Sony Michel and Nick Chubb. Why? Because defenses in the Big 12 are not built to stop the run in the SEC. And you're going to have to go through them. Oklahoma had 3 really good teams that could have played for a national championship, but they got steamrolled by the SEC in the college football playoff. You don't want that to be you if you're Cincinnati. If you're going to be a top 10 program and you have some SEC teams on your schedule, the next few years, or going to. This year, and if you make the playoff, you sure as heck will. The way of college football is you got to go through the SEC to win a national championship. Playing the 3-4 or a 4-3 defense is fine, because then you have an extra down lineman or an extra linebacker. But a 3-3-5, it works. It works during the regular season. Like against spread offenses in the AAC and elsewhere, that's fine. And it'll work in the Big 12. But against the big boys and the top dogs of college football, it won't. It just simply will not. Because the smart coaches like Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, they will exploit that. Great coaches and great programs will exploit an opposition's weakness. And in this case, that is stopping not being able to stop the run in a 3-3-5. If the Tulsa Golden Hurricane could do it, the Arkansas Razorbacks can certainly do it, and they will most likely. And that's why, after looking at Arkansas's numbers running the football and realizing Cincinnati last year and thinking back to their 2 performances against Tulsa and against Arkansas, or Alabama rather, it gives you this sense of, oh, we're about to get run over again. Like it very, very well could happen. And it's not a good feeling to have. And that's why you have to consider making the change. Teams will exploit other teams' weaknesses. Now, if you go back to 2020 in the Peach Bowl, and I thought about this, Georgia threw for almost 400 yards that game. JT Daniels had, I think, 396 that game. And they were airing it out to guys like George Pickens. And you wonder why Georgia was so successful in airing the ball out last year or in that game. Well, Cincinnati was missing its two of its best secondary players. Sauce Gardner didn't play that game. James Wiggins didn't play that game. So Georgia said, okay, we're going to exploit that secondary. And they did. They knew they couldn't run on Cincinnati. And it wasn't figured out yet because they were afraid of the vaunted monster of the 3-3-5. But they knew they could air it out deep, and it worked. So if you're wondering why, well, Georgia didn't run the football, they didn't have to because they knew they could go deep against Cincinnati's depleted secondary, and they did. This year, it's different. They have to be able to run the football. Arkansas, stop the run if you're Cincinnati. And that's why when you go up against SEC teams, and Mike Tressel's not making this change. He should. I don't think they will because it works too much in the regular season. But maybe when you play an SEC team, have that wrinkle that you're going to revert back to a base defense or a typical base defense of a 3-4 or a 4-3. Because if you have an extra front seven man on the field, that's going to make it easier to stop the run, right? Teams in the AAC, they're not, as savvy as an SEC team. They don't have the wherewithal and the smarts to say, okay, we're going to run on these guys because we can't. No, they're going to stick to what they do best. But the best coaches in college football will change their game plan week to week, specifically for the opponent, what they can exploit. And you look at Bill Belichick, 2004 playoffs. I was watching highlights of those this past weekend. It was a defensive game plan against the Colts in the divisional round. The next week, they focused on offense. They won games 20-3 and 41-27. They will fine-tune their game plan specifically for the opponent. When they played Buffalo this past year, and the coaching genius of Bill Belichick was still on display, they knew the weather. They ran the ball 3 times, or they passed the ball 3 times that game. They ran the ball every other time. They won the game 14-10. You wonder what makes a great coach? That does. I'm not saying Luke Fickell is not a great coach, but I am saying, and I'm not saying Mike Tressel's a bad defensive coordinator either. I think he is, but at the same time, I think he's really good rather. At the same time, like if you're able to, stop the run and revert back to a base defense, you're going to have a lot more success staying on top of the college football world and against SEC teams. Because if you don't make that change, and they're not going to, expect the Bearcats to get run over at Fayetteville. On tomorrow's show, once again, my colleagues Russ Hellman and James Rapine from All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated will join me for a season preview, the 3 of us. So be sure to tune in for that once the episode is posted tomorrow, or rather tonight. What's today? Tuesday? That'll be posted tonight at 8 for tomorrow, though. So be on the lookout for that. Mo Egger and the 700 WLW crew join me Thursday. Chris Vanini still working on that for The Athletic on Friday. Again, don't forget to subscribe to the Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel. You can follow us too to get an alert every time we drop a new episode. And of course, you can always follow me on social media channels. You can follow me on Twitter at Frankie_Natty with 2 N's and an ATI. You can follow me on Instagram, AlexFrank9_, or email me at alex3frank@gmail.com. Once again, thank you for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. Now, for your second listen, get more on the Big 12 by making Locked On Big 12 your second listen. Everyday host Josh Neighbors and the local experts of Locked On take you across the conference in 30 minutes. Locked On Big 12, your second listen. That's Locked On Big 12. For the Locked On Bearcats podcast, my name is Alex Frank. Have a great rest of your day. And I will be back tomorrow with Russ Heltman and James Rapine of All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated for our season preview number 3, season preview 5 different ways. Have a great rest of your day. For Locked On Bearcats, your team every day, I'm Alex Frank, and I will talk to you all tomorrow.